Hey everybody, thank you for joining. Really excited that you're here today. We have an awesome presentation and demo in store for you. Just going to give everybody a few moments to filter in and get situated. We'll start in about a minute. Thanks for your patience. If you are just entering in, welcome. Really excited that you've joined us. We're going to get started in about a minute. Thanks for your patience. Alrighty, looks like we are ready to begin. Again, thank you for joining. Really thrilled that you're here. If any questions do pop up during the conversation and the presentation, please feel free to just drop those in the question box on the right-hand control panel, and we'll be sure to get those answered for you. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter.
Thanks, Madison. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me before I move on.
Yes, all good.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining. We have a good presentation in store for you today around cloud testing in the AttackIQ platform. We've called it Cloud Security Done Right. And I think the titles are very suiting because we're going to learn how you can use the AttackIQ platform to not simply run attacks or run scenarios, if you want to use AttackIQ jargon, but we're going to learn how to use the AttackIQ platform to establish a security program around cloud testing. So we're going to get to that in a second. Here's our agenda. We're first going to talk about the cloud security optimization solution in general. So we're going to do a little overview. We're going to talk about cloud security for Azure, cloud security for AWS, and then the overall cloud security features. And then we're going to have a use case with a demo, a platform walkthrough, and the use case is going to be validating Microsoft Defender for Cloud's ability to detect threats against an Azure storage account. So that's the agenda for today. Let's get started. So let's do cloud security for Azure. Let's start talking about that. So remember how I was talking about operationalizing the AttackIQ platform to establish a cloud security program? Blueprints in the AttackIQ platform is your gateway to do that. And this is the blueprint templates page in the AttackIQ platform. This is how it looks when you actually start a blueprint. It's going to look like this, a step-by-step guide that goes far beyond simply running an attack or running a scenario, and actually tries to cover all the prerequisites and the planning and the scoping and the configurations needed to be able to establish a program through that assessment. So this is kind of your gateway or your hub to get started with both Azure testing and AWS testing. Think of it as one layer or one step above in the hierarchy from an assessment. It's more overarching. And the idea is through these blueprints and through these assessments that you're able to start monitoring how your Azure cloud security posture evolves over time. You can use dashboards that are pre-built, they're out of the box in the platform, and they're going to get populated with the results from these assessments. And that's the ultimate goal, that you have a real-time command center to understand your status and your security control performance in the cloud. So now let's talk about the Azure blueprints that are available. When we talk about blueprints, cloud blueprints, we can think about two distinct groups. There's the security control driven blueprints and the services driven blueprints. And the difference is the security control driven blueprints are designed, they were written by AttackIQ experts to help you instrument the platform to validate the performance of cloud native security controls, such as Microsoft Defender for storage, Microsoft Defender for identity, or Microsoft Defender for servers. Whereas in the services group, you have actual Azure resources or services, depending on what you want to call them, like storage accounts, virtual machines, that you're centralizing your testing around. So that's the main difference. And you're going to see all of these blueprints available in the platform. So let's get into what they are. In the Cloud Azure Blueprints for Security Controls category, there's the Microsoft Defender for Identity Blueprint, the Microsoft Defender for Storage Blueprint, the Microsoft Defender for Servers Blueprint, and the Microsoft Defender for Resource Manager Blueprint. And then when we talk about services, we have the Storage Accounts Blueprint and the Virtual Machines Blueprint. Now, all of these blueprints rely and build upon what we've called the Azure Setup Blueprint. And the idea is this is an introductory blueprint that gets you started with all of the concepts that you have to get familiarized with before you embark in your cloud testing journey. A lot of new concepts. Cloud is a new territory. It's undiscovered by a lot of our customers. So the idea is to make this as guided and as simple as possible. And the Azure Setup Blueprint, which in a second we're going to see how AWS has its own counterpart, helps you understand how you leverage all the different features and all the different concepts to be able to get your cloud testing program up and running. So that's, you can think of it as a prerequisite. You could say you could skip it, but it's an essential prerequisite to then get started on your more focused testing. If you want to test your virtual machine or your storage account, that setup blueprint is going to be crucial. Now let's talk about AWS. See, it's very similar. When you go to the blueprint templates page, you are also going to see AWS driven blueprints. They look the same, except the content changes. And the idea is the same. You want to get to the operationalization and the maturity of your security program around cloud through dashboards that you can monitor in real time, results and reports. And the idea is we make it easy for you to get there. We have the same two distinct groups. There's the security control group, and then there's a services group in AWS. So it is the same principle in that regard. Now let's explore this catalog. We have the AWS blueprints for security controls. There's the web application firewall blueprint, and then there's the Amazon Guard Duty blueprint. In this case, you have the Amazon Guard Duty blueprint for external threats and for internal threats. Now, the difference there is that for the internal threats blueprint, you're going to explore how your Amazon Guard Duty responds to a threat coming from inside your cloud deployment. Whereas in the external threats blueprint, you're leveraging the AttackIQ hosted agent, which acts or mimics an external attacker, and you can emulate the behavior of an attacker who's obtained lead credentials and is trying to attack Guard Duty from outside your cloud deployment. So that's the difference. And then for services, we have Amazon S3, we have Amazon EC2, CloudTrail, and web applications. And then in the case of Amazon EC2, you also have the ability to test internal threats and external threats, just like we saw before. These are the AWS resources that we've designed content around. Now, one more thing, in AWS, we do have an adversarial emulation, a piece of content, which is the anonymous access to AWS S3 bucket. And that's an attack graph for which we also have a blueprint so that you can operationalize that easier. And that is available in the AWS blueprints. Again, all of these rely on the setup blueprint. AWS has its own. so that you can get familiarized with all the concepts and all the pre-configurations that you need to go through before actually leveraging the AWS content. All right, now let's talk about the features themselves. The AttackIQ Cloud Security features, the key ones are the AttackIQ blueprints, which we've gone over so far to a degree, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail in a second. AWS and Azure testbeds, global variables or global properties, Kibana dashboards, AttackIQ notebooks, and the AttackIQ hosted agent. So let's go over these. Blueprints. Blueprints are available in the content library. If you log into the AttackIQ platform and in our left side navigation, go to the content library, you're going to find a section called Blueprint Templates. And as we've been mentioning, these are step-by-step guides. They're written and updated by experts at AttackIQ. And the idea is to make it easier for you to meet your cloud objectives. The idea behind blueprints is you can go at your own pace. You can leave notes. And you, in general, can have an easier journey when it comes to establishing and tracking progress around your cloud testing journey. Then we also have the testbeds for AWS and for Azure. Understanding an Azure deployment or an AWS deployment is not simple. In fact, the road to testing an actual production environment, be it Azure or AWS, is complex. So the idea is that you can start getting familiarized with testing in AWS or in Azure in an environment that is isolated from your production environment. And that's why one of the features in the platform is you can generate a testbed using Terraform and CloudFormation scripts to test in this safe environment and get familiarized with what credentials you're going to be using, how you're going to be configuring the scenarios. Once you're done with the testbed experience, then you're able to mature and use actual credentials and actual parameters and test in production. So that's the idea behind the testbeds. And you're going to see in the blueprints how you can get to the generation of a testbed that you can use for initial testing. Global variables is also a key feature in cloud testing because they allow you to easily configure scenario parameters from multiple scenarios. So you can think of all the parameters, all the credentials that you're going to need. Credentials is a crucial part of cloud testing, and global variables allows you to easily configure them all at once, predefining them, and then you can simply, with a very few set of clicks, simply rely on them or leverage them to be able to run your assessments. So global variables are a great tool. You can think of them as a shortcut. You can think of them as business assets, because what you're actually testing in cloud in a way are these credentials for a storage account, for a blob container, for file share. You're going to see how that behaves on the platform in a second. If you didn't want to store these credentials in the platform itself, and you happen to use AWS Vault, then you can also integrate with AWS Vault to fetch, for the platform to fetch your credentials from Vault for your testing. So that's one feature that's also included. Kibana dashboards, we have a set of out-of-the-box dashboards that you can leverage. And again, you're going to populate these with the results from your executions. In fact, this is what we're going to see in the demo in a second. They're tailor-made for distinct audiences. There's different types of dashboards, both for AWS and for Azure. And the idea is this is kind of your real-time, again, command center where you can explore and monitor your deviations over time and your performance in the cloud. AttackIQ Notebooks is another reporting capability that is available for cloud. And the idea is you can generate more detailed spreadsheets and reports to understand your performance in the cloud as well. So there's different types of reports also that you can generate through AttackIQ Notebooks. And lastly, the AttackIQ hosted agent, which, as I mentioned before, if you see this toggle here, you're going to see it on the platform in a second. That means that you're relying on the hosted agent to actually run your attack. And what that means is the attack is coming from outside your cloud deployment. For example, one example that you can think of is how an attacker would behave using leaked AWS credentials to enumerate S3 objects. You would rely on the hosted agent to mimic that behavior. So once you see this toggle here, it means that your hosted agent is set up and you're using it to run all of these cloud attacks. Let's go to the use case. So we have two personas in our use case. We have the SOC manager and we have the detection engineer, Oscar. And so the idea here is this person, Carlos, the SOC manager, is working with Oscar, who's a detection engineer, to fortify the security of their Azure storage account, which is housing sensitive patient data. So we could think in this exercise that we're working with a healthcare institution. And the request for Oscar was to set up dashboards that can serve as a real-time command center, offering a comprehensive view of Microsoft Defender for Cloud's performance in safeguarding Azure storage. So this person, Oscar, has limited experience in cloud testing, but he's going to use the AttackIQ platform to validate Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We know that we have Microsoft Defender for Cloud as a cloud native control, and we know that it should be testing, or it should be detecting threats against Azure storage accounts, but we're not sure. This is precisely what we're going to validate using the AttackIQ platform. So the plan is to gain expertise configuring these assessments and setting up these dashboards using the AttackIQ platform. So now let's go to the platform. So as Oscar, I would log into the platform and I would go to the content library and I would go to blueprint templates. And you can see that there's different types of content, right? In the blueprints, there's virus total, there's atomic red blueprint. So it's not only limited to cloud, but because my intention is to validate the performance of, or validate the security rather, of my Azure storage account, I'm gonna type here Azure storage. And here's my Azure storage accounts blueprint. So if I'm gonna read the description really quickly, the goal of this blueprint is to allow users to validate how their Azure storage account environment performs against specific cloud native threats. So it does sound like what I'm looking for. I'm going to go ahead and start the blueprint. And I can see off the bat that there's two stages in the blueprint. There's the external threat stage, and then there's the health check stage. So before reading some more, I'm going to just start the blueprint and say Azure storage accounts blueprint. Just kind of call it one. Sure, I've created more. And there's my blueprint. So now I'm able to get started, right? I'm able to embark on my journey and take all the steps that I need to take to be able to set up my assessment. Now, because we have a limited amount of time, I've made some progress on the same blueprint before, and it's here. And you can see, so this is, if you think about this, it's almost as if this person, Oscar, had already completed this work and someone else logged into the platform to collaborate, and they can see, oh, all right, someone's been finishing these steps that we need to take to be able to do cloud testing. So if we go to the prerequisites step, you can see that the first one is the required stages from the Azure setup blueprint. And what that means is that setup blueprint that I had been mentioning before has been completed. So Oscar or someone else, in this case it was me, for the sake of the role-playing exercise, completed this, this action. So we're good there. Then we move to the planning stage. So the planning step has two actions. It's identifying the scenarios and scoping the work. Identifying the scenarios is crucial because these are the attacks that we're going to be running. So if I click there, I don't have to wonder what attacks I should be running. So our scenario library is vast and cloud testing is complex. I don't need to explore the scenario library looking for which attacks are relevant to my Azure storage. I could simply click on identify scenarios here, click on the platform action. My blueprint widget here is following me. I can minimize it. But here I'm shown what the scenarios are that we're going to be using. So the assessment template is the Azure Blueprint Storage Accounts External Threat assessment template. And there are three tests. There's one for blob container, one of the subcomponents of an Azure storage account, one for file share, and one for storage account. So we start small. The idea is we get familiarized with the attacks, and we're only doing 3 scenarios. We're doing upload zip, iCar file to Azure Storage Blob Container, upload WannaCry warm sample to Azure Storage File Share, and Azure Storage Content Enumeration using PowerShare. So those are the three scenarios that we're going to be using. The idea here was to identify those scenarios, to get familiarized with them. I've done that, so I can go back to my blueprint. Then I have a step or an action called scope work. And the idea here is for the users to decide which business assets and security controls are utilized. Now, I know that I want to validate Microsoft Defender for Cloud, so I've taken that into account. I've marked this as completed. Now we can move on to the execute stage. Now, here's where a lot of the action happens before actually analyzing the results and moving on to remediation. Deploying the hosted agent. I've been mentioning the hosted agent. And in this step, we get a link to the support portal to understand essentially what the hosted agent is, how it behaves, and how I can actually set it up. But then once I've done all of that, I can go to the assets page and confirm that I have an asset with OS AttackIQ, which means the hosted agent is set up and I can leverage it for my cloud testing. So I've done that. Go back to my blueprint. Then here's the test beds that I was talking about. So create Azure test bed. For the sake of this exercise also, we are going to be relying on the test bed. And what you do in this case is to go to the script. Okay, so here are the steps. And here's all the instructions on how to generate a test bed for AWS or for Azure that you can use and that is isolated from your actual production environment and that you can use to start running these attacks safely before you move on to production. So I've marked that as complete. That's what we're going to be doing here. Quantify controls. I already know that I'm going to be doing Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So mark that as complete. Integration manager and integration. These steps are crucial before execution. So install integration manager. I'm just going to click there and I see that the integration manager is installed. So it's active. It's up and running. We actually have Microsoft Defender for Cloud set up through a SIM, which is Sentinel. So my integration has been set up. And why is this crucial or important? Because what we're going to be monitoring today is precisely detection. We're not going to be covering the prevention layer as much. If you think about someone breaking into your house, we're not going to see if the lock prevented that person from breaking in. We're actually going to monitor if those alarms, when someone tried to break in, are getting to my systems. So that's why the integration is crucial. It's a detection exercise that we're doing today. So that's set up, the integration manager. Now the next one is the actual integration. And here's what I was talking about before. Minimize my blueprint companion here. So here's Microsoft Sentinel. I can see that it's set up. And that's how I'm actually going to be getting those IOCs to know that Defender is actually detecting these behaviors. So if you go to SIM management, you can actually see the IOC fields in here that are going to be used to detect these behaviors. So here, IOC fields. Now let's go back to our blueprint. And here's where you actually start to get close to creating the actual assessment. So run emulations. You've done all the setting up that you had to do before. Now you're creating the actual assessment that you're going to run. If you click create assessment, again, this is a step-by-step guide, and the blueprint is creating the assessment for you. So what you've done here is the blueprint has created for you the assessment that you are going to run with the scenarios that you saw before, one for blob container, one for file share, one for storage account. You can see here that these are not ready. And the reason they're not ready is because we have to apply those global variables that we have been talking about. Now let's go back to our blueprint and just use this guidance to set those up. So there are a handful of global variables that I have to set up. So if I click here, the first one I'm instructed to set up is the Azure AD application. So select global property. There's already an Azure credential in the platform. It's been created. And the reason is this person, Oscar, probably, they already entered all the credentials that I need for Azure testing, probably over the course of the Azure setup blueprint. So now all I have to do is, all right, for the sake of this assessment, I'm just going to leverage these and say apply. And now I'm done with this. and I'm going to move on to the next one. The next global property that I need, it's the Azure file share credential. I'm going to say apply as well. Mark this as complete. So it's the same process for the rest. The Azure subscription, another parameter that I need. Mark is complete. Azure storage account. So remember, we're testing Azure storage, blob containers, and file share. So you do need the parameters for all of these to be able to do your cloud testing. Now, the idea is once you've finished configuring all of these, you should be able to run your assessment. So once you're done there, your very last step is to run the actual assessment. So click on Run Emulations and Run Assessment. That's what you're going to be doing. You're actually going to run the assessment that you had been configuring up until this point. Now, one thing to take into account is this is the introductory stage. When you move on to the second stage, I'm going to just fast forward a little bit and talk about completing the actual blueprint and show you what this person, Oscar, did. When you get there, you're going to find out that you're doing actually twice as many scenarios, because the idea is you have a good amount of coverage of the attacks that you can run. And I'm just going to go to the assessment that has already been set up using the Azure Storage Account Health Check assessment. So I think I have that here. I do. So this is the assessment once it's been set up and configured to run on a scheduled basis with all of the scenarios available in it. And you can see here how we are getting detections for the most part. And this is where Oscar should come in and kind of describe what behavior, what is in Microsoft Defender for Cloud preventing a certain execute or a certain attack from being detected. But this is what you ultimately get. You get an assessment where you are getting detections for these behaviors. We can, for example, go and get into one specific one, such as this scenario, which is the upload zip iCar file to Azure storage blob container. You can see that this was detected. I don't even need to leave the platform to understand how it was detected. If I go into detection details, I can see that it was in fact detected by Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And I can see here that it was classified as potential malware uploaded to a storage blob container. I can see the correlation summary, so all the detail that I need. If I go back, I can get into all the scenarios that I want to explore. So if I open here a new tab, for instance, this was not detected, so I can get into the mitigations of it and understand different aspects from which I can mitigate. There's the minor mitigations and the general mitigations. So enable Microsoft Defender for storage and restrict Azure permissions are two of the general mitigations I'm provided to troubleshoot and improve our performance here, or improve the performance of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Now, this is your assessment set up to run on a scheduled basis. So everything is kind of performing there the way we'd want it to perform. But one of the key requirements was to set up a dashboard that could be real time and that could kind of serve as a real time command center to understand our performance in Azure. So to do that, remember how I mentioned that there are dashboards that are out of the box and that you can use. If you go to dashboard here, you can see the dashboards that are available. I'm going to go to the Azure Storage Accounts Detailed dashboard. And here, I can see that I've configured it to examine results from the last 7 days. And for my SOC manager, what I could do is I could provide this dashboard and say, hey, here what you're going to see are all of the assessment runs that we've been doing in the last 7 days, how many attacks we've been actually testing. It's been 6, a total of 6. One storage account that we've been testing so far. We haven't been able to mature past that, but with the help of blueprints, we could probably set up one storage account, mature over the course of weeks or months, and then move on to testing other Azure subscription or other storage accounts. And then I get more widgets with more details. So I can see the actual scenarios that were executed, of all of the executions, how many were prevented and how many were detected. Now this is a detection exercise, so it is what we're focusing on. All of the assessments that have been executed. And then in here, I can see that in the month of November, 83% of the executions or the attacks have been detected and 16% have been not detected. And that's what's going to trigger those interesting discussions with our SOC manager to understand, all right, what happened in this 16%? Was it that Defender had its license expired? Was it that it was not configured properly? And those are the questions, those are the key questions you want to be asking yourselves and asking within your team to make sure that these cloud native controls are configured and performing as expected. So that's the idea behind this dashboard that is going to be updated depending on how you configure it with all your executions for the time frame that you'd like it to show. Now, to wrap up the exercise, one of the other things I wanted to show you was you're not only limited to an Azure storage account. If you wanted to actually cover all of Azure or do more comprehensive coverage of Azure, let's imagine that the SOC manager said, all right, we're mature enough with Azure storage, but now I want to cover more services. So there's this dashboard too, Azure Services Overview, which has the Azure storage account that we have information for because we've just done all the configuration, all the work. But we also have Azure Virtual Machines external threats, Azure Virtual Machines internal threats, and Azure Web Applications. Now, it's as simple as I want to populate these dashboards with all of the information that I have available. So I'm going to go back to my content library, and let's say I want to start with this particular resource, Azure Web Applications. I'm going to go to the blueprint templates, type in Azure Web Applications Blueprint, and then it's the same process. It's the same methodology. I'm going to do all of my global variables. I'm going to run my assessments. The blueprints are going to help me understand what scenarios I'm going to be running, and then I'm able to operationalize a program around cloud testing. So with that, I want to say thank you. This was the exercise. I'm going to read our chat to see if some questions came in. I did see a couple. One is, do I need to use blueprints to run cloud assessments? And the answer is no, not necessarily. If you go to the assessment templates, you can actually find assessment templates associated to the blueprints. So here's, for instance, Azure Storage Accounts Health Check. That is the blueprint that we used. Now, the difference is that you don't get all the guidance and all the step-by-step information that really helps you understand the methodology and all the steps that you need to take before you actually run the assessments. But short answer is no, you don't need the blueprint. It's not mandatory, but it is of incredible use, incredible help. Can I test more than one storage account? Yes, there you are able to test more than one storage account, as I mentioned before. In fact, if you go to the here, if you go to settings and you go to global configurations and you go to scenarios, you're going to see all of the different variables that I had been talking about before. So here's the parameter, for instance, for one Azure subscription, but nothing stops us from adding more Azure subscriptions and creating more assessments to run against those as well. So there is no limit. I have one more here. Are there dashboards designed around security controls instead of resources? I believe there are. If you go to the dashboards, you can see that there is a security controls overview dashboard, I believe, for Azure. Just Azure Security Control. Yeah, there's an Azure Security Controls overview as well. So you're not only limited to the services angle. Any plans for GCP or OCI? Assume that OCI is Oracle. I will need to go and check with the team. I don't know that there are immediate plans for GCP coverage. I know we've gotten that question in the past, so if there's interest, happy to jump on a separate call and understand your testing needs for cloud and for GCP and for Oracle. Thanks for asking. We have heard that before, so be interested in learning more. All right, more questions, more questions. I don't see any more coming in. If there are no more questions, going once, going twice, just gonna give it back to you, Madison.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlie. That was a really great presentation and demo. Thank you all for joining today. We hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much.